After watching and enjoying The Love Bug, we decided to try one of the Herbie sequels. So we actually watched the first sequel, which was called Herbie Rides Again from 1974. Now this was a very, very different film than the first one. What did you think of this?
I really liked this one. I liked the grandma in here.
Right. Now the grandma, they call her Granny. It's actually Tennessee. Now if you remember from the first film, Buddy Hackett played a character called Tennessee, who was like, he was very... he was
the comic relief.
He was the comic relief in the film, and he was very ethereal, and he was the one that could communicate with Herbie and talk to him because he had studied in Tibet. Well, his character has gone back to Tibet, and he's left Herbie in the care of his aunt, who's played by Helen Hayes, and she does a great job in here, and you really liked her a lot. The Dean Jones character, who was the race car driver who drove Herbie, he had so much success supposedly with Herbie that he's gone and he's racing on the European circuit now, so he's gone as well. And Michelle Lee was the love interest, and I don't think we really got an explanation as to where she went.
No.
But she's not in this film, so we don't know. Dean Jones is replaced here with Ken Berry. Now, they look a little bit alike. Ken Berry sort of fills both the romantic male lead as well as the comic relief in here because he's a physical comedian, and they encompass that into his role. He is not a race car driver. He actually is a lawyer here, and he's the nephew of the antagonist in the movie. The antagonist is a land developer whose name is Hawk, and played by Keenan Wynn. And he has demolished all the buildings around the firehouse. We have the firehouse back from the original film. And Tennessee's aunt is living in the firehouse, and she's the last holdout, and she won't sell the property. And Hawk is trying to get the property from her, and he's trying to get Ken Berry's character, his nephew, to get possession of the firehouse. The other character we get here is played by Stefanie Powers, and she resembles Michelle Lee. She's not playing that role. She has been displaced because her building was demolished, and so she's kind of staying with Granny and helping her out, trying to fight Hawk in this film. So very, very different setup. There's no racing in this movie except for a flashback sequence where Herbie is remembering his days as a racing car. And they use some footage from the first film, all kind of distant shots, B-roll of Herbie, so you don't see the leads in there at all.
No.
And go ahead.
I think that the one thing I would have liked to see them put in there at the end was when Herbie broke off into two parts, and Tennessee's side when
right, so during the first film, in that last race, Herbie breaks in half, and Tennessee was in the back seat, and Tennessee's back end of Herbie passes the front end where Dean Jones was, so Herbie placed first and third in the race. And so you're talking about in that flashback montage, you would have liked to have seen that. I would have liked to have seen that too. I'm sure it didn't get in there because it was all B-roll stuff without the leads in it. But that's the only element of racing that we get in this film, and I think they put it in there on purpose because they knew people were going to want to see Herbie race a little bit, and he doesn't get to do that in this film because as much as he's been left in Granny's care, he's also caring for Granny. And he sticks close to Granny and makes sure that everything goes okay.
I think that I do miss Tennessee a lot, but I definitely like Stefanie Powers. Yeah,
she plays a great role here. She's tough. She belts Ken Berry a couple times in here, especially when she finds out he's Hawk's nephew. And so she definitely is she and actually Granny are the strong-willed ones here. Ken Berry he's a physical comedian, so he does a lot of pratfalls, and he's a little bit inept, and he kind of follows their lead, and he they tell him what to do, and he kind of does that. So she does play a really good part here.
I also like the Granny because I think that while Stefanie Powers' house is gone, the grandma's is still there, and she's standing up for it. Right,
so and as much as Herbie is responsible for that, Granny is too, because she won't put up with anything. She won't get pushed around, and she makes it very clear. And so I think that is pretty cool. Now, in the first film, the thing that I remember you laughing at most was that segment where Herbie split in two halves. You laughed nonstop. I don't know if I've heard you laugh that much ever at a movie, but you laughed more times in this movie. Especially this segment where Herbie's gone up the window washer lift right, with Granny in the car, and they're on the building that Hawk owns, and his office is there, and he has left the windows to his office open after having yelled at the window washer. And so Granny goes up with Herbie, and she turns on the window washing mechanism, so it's spraying soap and water all in Hawk's office and all over Hawk. And then Herbie goes in, and he's chasing him around the desk, and there's suds, and Herbie's doing it. And it's obviously Keenan Wynn's stunt double, but it doesn't matter. It's just this guy covered with suds, and it was a very funny sequence, especially because they sped up the pace of the footage to make it even more comedic, like the Keystone Cops kind of thing. There were a lot of segments like that in the film where there were just funny segments that they were able to work in bits where Herbie creates humor, and especially, and they would repeat it too. I mean, they went around the desk a few times and they stopped and did something, and then they were like, well, this is funny, let's do it again. And I mean, they did it again. We laughed just as much the next time. So there were a lot of funny parts in this, but it was just a very, very different story than the first one. It also had, for me, a few false endings. I thought the movie was basically going to come to a close, and then it extended a little bit more sometimes. So that was kind of interesting. What else about this film?
I like when, at the end, Hawk tricks Granny. And so they think that it's all done, and they think that...
She thinks she's won.
Yes.
She thinks that Keenan Wynn's character has given up, and she's won, and they don't have anything to fear anymore.
But then Hawk comes back with some, construction.
Yeah, he's got all his demolition equipment with him, and he's going to, go after the firehouse, basically.
And Herbie knows. And when... Ken Berry and Stefanie Powers are out to dinner. Herbie's gone out, and
he goes and gets them.
Yes, and then they go and they get all of the other Herbies, I call them, but there's just
they're all the other Volkswagen Bugs, and it's Herbie that does it. I mean, they're not even aware that there are other sentient cars out there, but Herbie knows, and so as Herbie's passing by, Volkswagen Bugs are coming out of garages and off the street and out of drive-in movies where people are still in the back seat at the drive-in movie watching the movie. And then there's even one, and it was, I know you loved it because you laughed every time. There's one that comes out of a junkyard and it's barely able to move, and it's very funny.
It's the slowest one. It's
Yep, and it's clanking along, and pieces and parts are falling off of it as it does so. But they come like the cavalry with this, herd of Herbies. To chase after the demolition equipment, and again they speed up the pace, and the demolition equipment, the guys are driving the construction vehicles are driving off really fast.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of those kind of segments. Interestingly, I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes. In this particular film, of all the Herbie films, this one scores the highest. And I didn't expect that. I would have expected maybe the first one to score the highest because it was fresh and new and the racing theme was there. And you had the Dean... I missed the interaction between the Dean Jones character and Tennessee. You had, the leading man and the comic sidekick, and they played off of each other very well, and there was a lot of chemistry. Ken Berry does both. He's the leading man, but he's also the comic relief in the film. And he does a lot of the physical comedy. And I thought Dean Jones as a lead... He was more competent, let's say. He would get into situations and he could play for humor, but it wasn't physical humor, and you didn't feel he was bumbling, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But Ken Berry, you would know him from F Troop or Mama's Family, and especially in F Troop, he did a lot of physical comedy there. It's a gift that he possesses, and so they played to his strengths and let him do that, and that was fine. I mean, he played a very different character. Even though he looks like Dean Jones, he didn't try to mimic that character, and I give them points for that. So that's good.
Yeah. I think that, so the Granny has this, it's like another live thing, and it's a music.
Yes. Tennessee had alluded to the fact that there are other sentient things that we think of as inanimate objects could actually be sentient in this kind of music jukebox thing.
And I was going to say that I think that was actually in the first one, but they didn't show it.
Right.
And I thought that it was hilarious because the song, the grandma knew what the song was saying.
Right, so that's how it was communicating with her. And so that was kind of cool, and it really felt, those were the parts where it felt the most like a Disney movie of that era especially. And that's an important piece, especially there's a segment where, the antagonist has taken all of her possessions out of the firehouse. So she and Ken Berry, Stefanie Powers, and Herbie go steal them back, and they've got them on a trolley.
Yes.
And the trolley winds up being a runaway trolley, and that jukebox it's not a jukebox. It's an old-fashioned style one, wooden and everything.
Yeah.
It's playing certain music to indicate, we're in trouble here. And so,
Yes.
it was a lot
But the
of fun.
grandma keeps on knitting.
Yeah, she's just knitting, and she's completely unaware of what's going on. And yet she's with it. You know what I mean? There's never a point where you feel like she's helpless. Because she's a
Right.
strong character. She's just not worried because she knows it'll all come out okay.
Yes.
So she doesn't concern herself with such things. All right, anything else?
No, I don't think so.
All right, your last take.
I think it's a see it.
Yeah, I was going to say stream it because I was kind of in the middle about it. But the more I think about it, I don't think it's as good a film as the first one. I don't even know if I think it's a great film, but it was a lot of fun. Like, we laughed a lot, and there were a lot of funny moments in it. So I would say, stream it, moving toward a see it. So I'm kind of in there somewhere. I still think the first one was better. I missed the racing. And I missed Tennessee. So the next one is Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo. And Dean Jones comes back. I'm not sure how they're going to write him in. Tennessee does not. But there is a comedic sidekick in it, and it's an actor that you're not really familiar with. So I'll be interested to see how you react.
I did like Tennessee, though, and I did miss him in
I miss Tennessee. I agree. Maybe it's that Lou Costello piece. He feels like that, and you like Abbott and Costello so much, and I love them. So it could be that. All right. Well, we'll see you in Monte Carlo.